Hello and welcome to AI with GenAI. I'm your host, Gennai, and I'm delighted to welcome Miriam Vogel to the podcast today. She is our last guest of our summer series. Miriam is the president and CEO of EqualAI, a nonprofit created to promote artificial intelligence governance. She also served as chair of the National AI Advisory Committee, mandated by Congress to advise the president and White House on AI policy. Miriam co-hosts her own podcast, In AI We Trust, and has taught technology law and policy at Georgetown University Law Center, where she served as chair of the alumni board. Miriam is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and also serves as a senior advisor to the Center for Democracy and Technology. She served in the White House in 2 administrations, including as the acting director of Justice and Regulatory Affairs. Most recently, she had served as Associate Deputy Attorney General at the Department of Justice. She has extensive experience working with C-suite, board of directors, policymakers, lawyers, and other key stakeholders to establish best practices for legal and regulatory compliance, as well as establishing and operationalizing best practices in AI governance within Fortune 100 companies across multiple industry sectors. Welcome, Miriam. So delighted to have you here today.
John, thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be on here with you.
Well, we've heard such an impressive resume there of all of your experience in government and private and advisory roles, but let's bring us behind your bio. Tell us a little bit more about what brought you to the more responsible and ethical side of artificial intelligence.
Jen, there was never really an option for me. I came into this world of technology through the lens of a lawyer and a policymaker. As you mentioned, I did a few tours at the White House. I had the privilege of serving at the Department of Justice, being a general counsel at Dana-Farber and other places. I started to realize about 7 years ago that the things I cared about, creating opportunity, innovation, education, access, were all going to be either furthered or hindered significantly in either direction, dependent upon how we addressed AI policy. It's one of those things, once you open your eyes to it, you can't unsee it. And I had dealt with bias and harm mitigation when I was at the department doing criminal justice reform, and also when I was at the White House in that work, as well as leading the president's Equal Pay Task Force. As a lawyer, I was in the habit of establishing frameworks to make sure that innovations, technologies, all of the operations that have risks and consequences in our society are handled and managed safely so that they are both legal and also beneficial to more of society. For me, I was backwards entering into computer science and technology, so excited about innovations and the opportunities, but realizing at this critical juncture where I believe, Jen, we still are, we can be very thoughtful and make sure that it creates a really better society. It's so exciting, the things you can think about that AI can help us achieve. And if we are not intentional, thoughtful, and careful at this very moment, we alternatively will go in the opposite direction where we create an opportunity gap so wide, I don't know if we'll be able to recover.
No, that's very true. And you have such a unique and critical lens of seeing both how companies in the private sector as well as in public sector and your network of people that you're hearing from all the time about the technology they're building, but also how they think about governance. So that really sets us up for that first question in our standard T3 trio about how is AI shaping industries that you are either most excited about or the ones that you see leading to the biggest change? Where are you seeing AI shaping where you're closest at?
I'll tell you where I see the potential for it shaping, because I think we have some blocks in the way, and I think we'll get into that. When you look at how it is presenting so many new opportunities in healthcare, when you look at cancer diagnosis and different tools that we've seen, Sybil, an AI model produced by MIT and Mass General, that in one study predicted lung cancer a year before it presented, with 86 to 94% accuracy. As somebody who's had 2 beloved members of my family and a very dear cousin who passed away from lung cancer, the idea that it could have been spotted a year before incidence is just mind-boggling and so exciting. I do think that we have to be careful. Happy to get into that if you'd like, but as you know better than most, Jen, it can only be as effective as the data it runs on, as careful as the algorithm is presented, is designed. For whom are we designing it? For whom was it tested? And so as we begin to explore and rely on these exciting innovations, it's also very important that we understand for whom is this being designed and for whom could this fail.
Exactly right. For whom, but also with whom. Are the people we're designing for,
Right.
are they involved somehow? Are there representatives? We know that we can't listen to everyone, but we have to make such deliberate choices of who gets to design these systems, who gets to test them, provide feedback and influence how they're done. So no, it is time to get right into some more of those like ethical and regulatory challenges. As you point out, this has great potential, especially in the healthcare space. This can improve not just quality of life, longevity, the ability to survive. So tell us more. What are those ethical or regulatory challenges that are stopping us from achieving those promises, or that we really need to focus on today in order to get to this more beneficial future?
Well, again, it's understanding exactly as you said. And it's no surprise that I'm mirroring some of what you say, Jen, because you were one of my best instructors as I was getting up to speed on the best practices, the protocols, the best strategies to make sure we're doing this properly. Very few people in the world know this better than you. And so I've been so privileged to talk with you and learn from you over the years. What I've learned, so you can tell me if I've gone in the wrong direction, is making sure that you have a process in place that will account for what you have tested and when, making sure that you are clear definitionally, being very explicit with the definitions of what you are testing and when. It is being very practical, very detailed, documenting. AI crosses borders, boundaries, people every second. And so we have to make sure that as we are intentional and careful, we're also being very explicit on how we're documenting that intentional, explicit testing so that people down the line understand what was tested, how, and when.
Mm-hmm. And can I poke a little bit on that and say, given you're such a diverse stakeholder group that you engage with quite often, are there some of these ethical processes that are most challenging, or that you feel that people know what they should be doing to build responsible technology, but either this particular aspect is too hard, it requires a certain set of skills, or people are feeling, well, I'm not seeing all my other peers in the industry doing it. I'm not going to invest the time and energy in it. Any feedback there that you're hearing about what stops people from following these ethical processes, which you nailed, by the way, of what we need more people to use?
Well, thank you. A high compliment from you, Jen. Thank you for this question. I think I would love to spend the rest of the show and the rest of the day talking about this very question with you, because it's often not bad intentions that are taking us to bad outcomes. It's lack of familiarity. It's lack of understanding. Even if they're trying to design a perfect algorithm, is going to be limited by their own experience and curiosity. So the more people who are participating in the process, I think, is the best salve for making sure that AI is safe and more useful. And I think a key driver of that is making sure that companies are aware of what the risks and best practices are. And I think it's really hard right now. At EqualAI, we try to help fill that gap by making sure all the companies and partners and policymakers and foundations we work with are aligned on best practices. But right now, if you're not in one of these communities, it's hard to know what the risks are or how to mitigate them. And then we deal with a bigger problem. Even if you are in a company that is intentional, is thoughtful, and is forward moving on AI technology, what we're finding is that most of the people in that company are not AI literate. And even more so, the consumers are not AI literate. So for, as you know, Jen, 6.5 years, EqualAI has been focused on AI governance. What are the best practices to make sure that we govern AI in a way that is making sure that it will realize its promise in our dreams? On the other hand, where we are right now in this space is this huge gap where so many of the people who are supposed to be using AI on internally, externally, and as well as those regulating the AI really don't understand the basics. They don't know that they are using AI. I'd be curious to hear your experience, but when I give a talk, I always like to learn and not just talk. And I'll ask the audience, how many of you have used AI today? And no matter what room I'm in, no matter how sophisticated it is, I'm still only getting half the hands up. And I think a basic part of AI literacy is knowing, first of all, you are using AI. Good news. You are in the AI economy. You are a heavy user. Are you really telling me you did not go through a news scroll this morning? You did not look at TikTok. You did not use Uber to get here or Netflix or Spotify sometime in the day. You probably have. You're an AI user. So what does that mean in terms of the risks that you could be creating or presenting for yourself? We look at 9 different categories of risks so that we can talk about mitigation strategies. Because what I'm also finding, Jen, is that most of the people I talk to are afraid. And when we acknowledge that, I think it brings a lot of comfort because people realize they're not the only one. In fact, they're part of the great majority. There are so many different reasons to be afraid, whether it's privacy concerns, hallucination, workforce displacement, the environment. Most of the young people I talk to, they know they need to dive into AI. They understand it's the economy, the world, the workforce, but they are very worried about all of the force they're depleting with every search. So these are all very real concerns that we need to address and just explicitly talk about mitigations. And then the third part of AI literacy, we need to also be talking about the opportunities. I think too often we're getting stuck talking about the fears and we're not letting people know all of the ways that they personally, their community, their society will benefit if we push forward and figure out the right mitigations so that they can use AI safely and effectively.
No, I completely agree. I love the way that you'd separate AI literacy there, that yes, I do get a lot of fear from people that they haven't even started using AI yet because of what could go wrong or about the risks. Part of what I see it is like, oh yes, they're very real risks, but here's how to identify them, manage them, try and govern them, build those guardrails. And it is about building comfort in management, but also comfort in the technology. This is what many of us are using. I also do that little question test of who's used it. Here's actually how it's integrated to almost everything that we use online today. Some people still just have this connection of if they haven't used a ChatGPT tool and active use, then they don't feel that they're using AI. But it's already integrated into so many of these systems, and helping people recognize that and building a bit of comfort of you're already using it. Here's how it's useful. And here's how to make the new and emerging technology useful as well, but in a safe and responsible way. So definitely taking those points in literacy is so important and increasingly important. So there's not a digital divide of essentially who can use it, who can't, and how to think about that. So if we get to build this technology in this responsible way, we're bringing together these different stakeholders. What is the world that you see that we're building towards for 2050? Or conversely, if we don't get these things right, what are we setting ourselves up for in the future? Crystal ball time, Miriam, here, if you can tell us where you see us going for 2050.
Crystal ball, if we get this right, we're thriving. We're living healthier, longer. We're more aware. We're more empathetic because it's very accessible to ask questions and learn more about others, to have a primer so that you can dig into any area of science, of politics, of history with a primer that will want to verify. I say use but verify, but it gives you a comfort to have this background. We all have access to a very thoughtful set of interns who can give us a background document to delve into areas we didn't know about before or we didn't have the courage to ask about. So I think in terms of our science, our health, our education capacity, if we get this right, we are at such higher levels that we all are able to personally thrive. Our economy is very strong. And hopefully that leads to less strife if more people are able to thrive. Some of the basic challenges in our society stem from basic hunger and basic need to be able to afford your housing, your food, support your children. So if we're able to address more of that through an economy that AI can support, we're in a better position. Mm-hmm. But if we don't address these 9 categories of risks urgently, we have a real environmental crisis. We're already in a tough climate. I don't know where you sit currently in DC. It's been pretty hot and increasingly hot. I grew up here, so we're no stranger to heat, but obviously these consequences are having big impacts on our farmers' ability to grow food, on our flights, on our daily life. So I think if we are not careful, we have an environmental crisis. If we're not careful, we create opportunity gaps that I mentioned before. And where I'm concerned is if you look at the data of who is using AI, we're already seeing gaps that have presented in so many other innovations and revolutions where we have a gender gap. The smartest women I know are not using AI for a variety of very good reasons. It can be overcome. If I issue a personal invitation, if I address some of the risks that they're concerned about in our conversation, if I give a use case that's meaningful, as opposed to them seeming like a cheating or some trivial toy, we can get more women to be using it. But we have to answer some of those questions about privacy, about cognitive decline, and so forth. We have a rural gap, we have an age gap. And my concern there is not only all of these people who will be self-selecting out or not able to fully participate and thrive in our AI economy and world, but almost as bad, if not worse, is that the AI will not be able to learn from all of these people because, as you know, again, better than anyone, Jen, AI is constantly iterating. And so many of us in different segments of society are not participating in using and training AI. We already know there's huge gaps in the data training set. If on top of that, we're not using it and training it as it's in the wild, we'll be at a point where it will not hear and see us.
No, and that's massively important. And we already see that there's some really inspiring efforts coming from the global south and a lot of researchers to make sure that essentially we don't make the same mistakes that we have with other technologies and that we're already seeing emerge with AI, with the lack of representation in data sets and the reinforcement of biases and historical exclusions or otherwise, that really being more conscious now, but also I like your optimism and thinking that where AI itself can be useful. And I talked about that with previous guests as well, that AI can help shed a light on our biases, help us identify where there might be opportunities for improvement. But it does require conscious and deliberate. Like you said, it's not about maliciousness. It's about knowledge gaps and how do we close them to make sure that we're closing these digital divides. And I love how you described the various ways of that. Our previous guest, Tracy Pizzo-Frey, had been talked about parenting and how raising Gen Z and thinking about how they use technology and how they're very AI native. Although now I've worked in AI machine learning for over 10 years at this stage, I'm not a native. I'm learning all the time. I'm still old school. Like my notes are all still written down and just what they can build with this knowledge, but also making sure that we are leaving a better foundation for them as well. There's only so much you can fix after the fact. If we're building the foundations of these AI and generative AI models and data sets, we have to ensure that they're inclusive of everyone and that we're building towards that. I love your 2050 vision. I think it's a bit more optimistic than my own. I'm still on the, if we do so many things, we can get there, but kind of brain focuses a lot on what's needed between now and then to get there.